Okay, everybody, good morning. Good morning and welcome to the first session of our course. It's the session of our project cycle and budget management course. We hope the Zoom will be nice for everyone. This session will be in English. We thank and we welcome Nicolò de la Chiesa. He's a planning expert and a great friend of the BICE network, who will be the facilitator of our course. To all, have a good session and good experience of formation. Welcome, Nicolò.
Thank you very much, Diego. So I will share the screen so that we can. Okay. So this session, as Diego said, will be about project cycle management. So all the different aspects of designing a project and managing a project. Maybe many of the things and the issues that we will be talking about are already familiar to you, as many of you have been working with projects. However, I think this time together can help us to fully understand how a project takes origin, which are the origins of a project, which are the main phases of preparing a project and managing a project. And so I hope that all this will be helpful for each one of you. And as you might have seen from the program, we are going to work on the different aspects, especially the analysis and planning of a project, and then the monitoring of a project. In this first session, I would like to give an overview of the main topics we are going to work on, so that it will be easier in the following sessions to be able to fully dive into the details of the different aspects we are going to work on. So I think the first thing is, as we are talking about projects, what is a project? So how can we define a project? A project is a series of activities that are oriented to specific objectives. And these activities will have to be carried out in a defined time period and with a defined budget. So here we start seeing a few elements which we will work with in these sessions. So we have activities which are concrete activities that the project carries out, objectives which are different from activities. An objective is a situation, is a problem which has been solved. So it is very important to clearly distinguish activities from objectives. Activities are those actions that lead to a change, and the change is an objective. So a problematic situation changed into a positive situation is what we call objective. Then, of course, a project has a time period, has a duration, can be a year, 3 years, 6 months, whatever, and a budget. All these elements are somehow linked together in a logical structure, and we will see the different steps which have to be taken in order to ensure that there is a good coordination and a good structure of a project. So these are the main elements of the project. However, projects should also have clearly identified stakeholders. So the stakeholders are all the people, institutions, organizations who have some kind of link with the project. A project has to have a clearly defined coordination, management, and financing arrangements, and a monitoring and evaluation system. We will see also these elements more in detail in our course. Now, the project is the core of this course. However, it is important to understand that a project is never an endeavor that is realized alone, but it is, we have to consider it in a broader reality, in a broader context. That is why we often speak about project cycle. A project cycle actually is the way we understand that each project, which is understood as a set of goal-oriented activities within a time frame and a defined budget, as we said, this project is not an isolated process, but is part of a cycle which we can see described in this slide. So, which are the different phases of this cycle? The first is the programming phase. So, the programming represents the broader context within which a project is carried out. The programming context may be set by, for instance, the public policy regarding a certain issue, or the general strategy of an organization, or the policy of a certain donor in a defined thematic or territorial area. It is very important to understand the planning context within which each project fits, because this ensures that the project is relevant with the context in which it is implemented. A project is, as we said, not an isolated set of actions, but it contributes with other actions, with other projects, to pursue broader goals which are set by the programming framework. So the different projects within a broader context should contribute in a complementary way to the achievement of the objectives set by the broader strategy or a broader policy. This is a common experience, for instance, when we work on a call for proposals of a donor. they normally give us the context within which they wish to receive proposals. And that is the programming context of that particular donor. So it is important to understand that the projects, each project has to fit in this programming context. So once the scope of the project has been understood, we can move on to the identification phase, which consists in identifying the scope in which the project will operate. So we narrow down the scope, and we have to try to understand the boundaries of our project, which, however, have to be consistent with the general context defined by the programming. For example, if we want to identify a project which we will implement within a donor strategy that aims to promote the welfare of children in a certain area, we will have to identify the broad area in which we will realize our activities, such as the area of education or health or protection or other areas. So within the broader programming area of, let's say, the welfare of youth, we will have to choose our the scope of our project, narrow the field by choosing an area that is consistent with the programming context, but also with our organization's capability, our experience, the priorities, and the problems we have to face. So this second phase is narrowing down the field of action of our project. In the next step, the formulation, once the scope of the project has been identified, we move on to the formulation phase, where we will focus on formulating actually a document, a project document, that will contain our objectives, the actions we will carry out, the time frame, and the budget. This formulation phase is the one on which we will focus, especially on this course, especially in the next two sessions, through the analysis and planning phases. When we draft a project document, the first steps we will take will be the analysis of the problems to be addressed and the determination of the relationships between the problems, because as we will see, the problems can be characterized by different levels. So some problems can cause other problems. So we will have to work and focus on the relationship, the logic of the relationships between the different problems, and determine their level in what we will call a problem tree. So once we will have identified the problems, we will proceed to formulate the objectives and the results of our project. We will see how to do this. And subsequently, we will have to plan the activities and the budget. A good project formulation ensures that there is consistency between the problems that we will have identified and the actions that we will choose to solve these problems. So the idea is that the methodology that we will use to formulate a project will always ensure that the activities that we realize and the costs that we will have to that will be necessary are focused to solve the problems that we identified, so that there aren't useless, if we can so call them, expenses or activities, but all the activities have to be consistent with the logic of the project, and so be oriented to solving the problems. The next phase, once we have a good project document, is the financing phase. So finding the funds needed to implement the activities that we defined in the formulation phase. As you know, funds may come from various sources. They may be the organization's own funds or donations from private individuals, funding from foundations or public bodies. Depending on the amount of funding and depending on the organization to which we apply funds, the procedures and documents required may differ. In any case, a good project structure is always a guarantee of transparency towards the donor, because, as I said, it ensures that the resources deployed are useful and oriented to achieving the intended objectives. So whatever the donor's requests are, I think it's always a good practice to have a clear idea and a clear structure of problems and objectives, as we will see with in the following sessions, with a good logical framework, which is the document that contains all these elements. Once we obtain the financing, next phase is the execution, the implementation of the project. And we will see how the tools that we will develop in the analysis and planning phase, in particular the logical framework, will allow us to monitor the realization of the project by ensuring, through the use of indicators, that the objectives of the project are met, and that the expenditure is congruent with the objectives that we will have to achieve. But we will develop these aspects further in the last meeting, the one dedicated to the project monitoring. And last phase in this project cycle is the evaluation. So monitoring and evaluation of a project is an essential function, and it has several objectives. Monitoring during the realization of activities ensures that the project follows the established schedule, and that the planned time and costs are met. A good monitoring also makes it possible to see whether the objectives are being achieved through the use of indicators, which we will see more in detail. And if necessary, to correct the activities should difficulties arise. The monitoring of a project must also take into account external elements to the project that may favor the project, but may also cause difficulties. We shall see what these external elements are when we address the logical framework. However, we can already say that an external element is a condition which is not controlled directly by our project, but it may influence its progress in a positive or negative way. So we have to we have a set of activities and objectives which are within the framework of our project, which are under our direct control. And we also have a set of elements which are external to our project, which we have to monitor, because in the case in which these elements may pose a problem to our project, we will have to take corrective actions. In addition to monitoring, which is carried out during the project, the evaluation, which is normally carried out at the end of the project or at the end of a phase of a project, the evaluation allows an analysis, a deeper analysis of the project that may help to assess aspects such as the project effectiveness, its efficiency, its relevance, or its sustainability. So the evaluation at the end of the project provides useful elements, as you can see, for the new programming. So the evaluation provides feedback for a new programming phase. What we have learned with our project, good things, bad things, the change of the context, is all fed into a new programming phase. Of course, the project cycle can be considered at different levels. At high levels, for instance, in public policies or in large donor policies, they will operate a programming using the feedback from the different projects that they will have supported. But also at an organization level, the different projects that our organization has carried out can give us a good feedback for our internal strategy, our internal programming. So this is a way of thinking the projects which can be applied at different levels, and which can ensure that each project is not an isolated item, but contributes with other actions, with other organizations, to a broader objective, a broader strategy, which is defined in the programming phase. So this is the first let's say, introduction to the project cycle, which I wanted to give you an idea of. Before proceeding, if there is any question or observation, please let me know, or else we can continue. Okay, so if this is clear.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah. Hello. This is Mary Teladare from India, working with WISE for a long time, and we work with children and women. In a rural community, and I would like some little clarifications. Identification, when you say it is one at micro and macro level. So that is also related to the impact of the program at the micro and the macro level. Say if you say education, which can be scaled, like children going to school, children progressing in school. But if you say the spillover of this impact on the larger community, then the change cannot be really caught very easily. So it's a process. So would a project cycle also implicate that in this cycle, where the evaluation part comes, then we have, because it's a project, a social project, a developmental project, a project of which completely intends to bring in the changes, but many changes cannot be brought in a specific time with the community be it, but the process starts. Can that be also captured?
Yes, so if I understand your question, you are referring to different levels, let's say, of impact, which can be brought about by different projects. So, for instance, if we work with an education project, we will have an immediate impact on the children, but then this result will have a broader impact on society in general. Is okay. So yes, of course, this is very important. And thank you for this question, because it is something that we will see more in detail, because as it is, as you said, we have different levels of change. So what you mentioned, the results and the impact are, let's say, of the same nature. We can consider them changes. We have changes of a lower level, for instance, a concrete result. So we have, for instance, children who are better educated. That is a concrete result that we can realize with a project in a certain area and with a certain number of children. So that is something that we can directly achieve with our project. And that is quite easy to measure, because we can count the children, we can evaluate the level of their learning, and that's easily evaluated. However, as you mentioned, this result has other effects at a broader level, at a society level, at a community level, or whatever. And of course, this is much more difficult to understand and to measure. However, we can try to measure this as well, which is a difficulty. The difficulty is especially related to the fact that there are many elements that can influence this higher impact. So the impact on society is not only given by children better educated, but it can be given by other elements, economic elements, or whatever other elements, which is not always easy to assess. What we should try to understand when we work in the context of a project within a project cycle is to always try and measure as accurately as possible at least what our results are, because this is what normally a donor asks us. However, we have to keep in mind that our actions have broader impacts. And that is very important, because we will see it in the problem analysis and in the logical framework. We will have to give to demonstrate a good understanding of how our results will impact the broader context, because this is very important for, let's say, the institution who is going to fund the project, to understand how the different activities, the different initiatives are going to contribute to the broader framework. However, measuring the impact is always more difficult, especially for a problem, let's say a time frame problem. Normally the impact comes a long time after the projects are ended. So it is not always easy at the level of an organization to be able to evaluate an impact. This should normally be done more at an institutional level with data and information that is available at a larger and more institutional level. So I don't know if I clarified your doubt. We will work on these different levels of results and impact. Maybe just to summarize, normally what we consider as an objective or a result is something that we can achieve within our project, while we call impact something which is broader than what we can achieve with our project, but that can be influenced positively by the actions of our project. So it is important to keep in mind this this framework.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so if we don't have other questions, then we can okay, then we can move on to the next phase, which is the analysis phase. We will see this more in detail in the next session. However, I would like to introduce the main topics of this phase, as it is quite important to understand that's all the different kinds of analysis and planning, and understanding in detail what we will be working with in the analysis and planning phase. So we said that to be able to formulate a project, we will have to go through an analysis phase and then a planning phase. The analysis phase starts with the stakeholder analysis, which brings us to identify and characterize all the major stakeholders. Stakeholders in the project can be many and of many different types. For instance, the donor who finances a project is a stakeholder. The organizations and the different partners who implement the project are stakeholders. The beneficiaries, the institutions who are somehow linked to the project. Each stakeholder should be clearly identified and characterized, because as we will see, there are two main criteria to characterize the stakeholders. Basically, each stakeholder may have a higher or lower interest in the project. For instance, a beneficiary has a high interest in the project. And the other criteria is the influence that each stakeholder may have in the project. For instance, the organizations who the donor has a high influence on the project because it can influence its the amount of activities that can be done. For instance, the institution, the public regulatory bodies may have a high influence on the project. However, they might have a low interest, but they have a high influence. Okay, so this is the first stakeholder analysis. We will see this in detail next time. However, it is important to understand that a good stakeholder analysis is important to understand the potential of the project, but also the potential problems that may arise with the different stakeholders. And it is also very important because it allows us to give a good description of the project and of all the different organizations and people and situations that may have an influence on the project. Once the stakeholder analysis is completed, then we can move on to the next analysis, which is the problem analysis, which is the problem analysis is the core of the project, as it allows us to identify the key problems, the constraints, but also the opportunities of the context where we want to work, and to determine the cause and effect relationships between the different problems. As we will see more in detail, the problem analysis gives us the materials to develop the objectives. So the objective analysis, the next phase, is exactly developing solutions for those identified problems and ordering these solutions in a logic of means to ends. So if the problems are related with a cause-effect relationship, so there are problems of lower level that cause problems of higher level, and we will have to identify these relationships. Once we identify the solutions to these problems, we will have to identify how these solutions are related amongst themselves, because we will have solutions of a lower level which will bring to higher level solutions. And we will call these solutions, these objectives, in a different way depending on their level. Basically, the lower level solutions or objectives are what we will call results, which are concrete results that are brought about by the actions of the project. And these results, if we obtain these results, then these results will lead to a higher level objective, which is the specific objective of our problem, of our project. Once we have defined problems and objectives, we will have to move on to the strategy analysis, which is it will be clear when we see it on an example. However, the strategy is the identification of the path that our project will take to resolve certain problems. Before, in the example that we were talking about, education, so an education project will allow us to get to a specific result, which is better educated children, for instance. And this result will lead to a higher result, which can be a broader result at society level or at community level for a certain community. This means that the education path that we chose to realize with our project is one of the possible strategies. We can also work with other strategies, which can be different strategies, like, for instance, more social oriented activities, or activities for of a more economic nature. All these different strategies can lead to a common objective. So again, the idea is that each project is a part of a broader action, and within a project there can be different courses of action. For instance, we can work on education, but we can also work, for instance, on health. These can be two strategies within the same project, or we can work, for instance, with advocacy activities or sensibilization. There can be different courses of action. The important thing is to identify clearly which is or which are the strategies that our project will realize, and have a clear idea of what remains outside of the project, because we can't do everything. However, we need to know which are the other actions necessary to and complementary to our actions to be able to arrive to the objective that we have set. So once the analysis phase is completed, then we can move on to the planning phase. So the analysis gives us the elements for our project, and once we have all the elements, so the problems, stakeholder analysis, objective analysis, and strategy, then we can formalize all these elements in a structure, which we call logical framework, which is a logic structure which links all the different elements of the project, particularly the different objectives of different levels, the activities, and the external elements. Moreover, a logical framework also contains indicators that allow us to measure the performance of a project. Now, in defining the project structure, it is very important, again, to clearly have a clear picture of what the objectives are and what the activities are. So the objectives, as we said, derive directly from the problem analysis, and we can consider them as a positive situation that our project will bring about. So it's the change that our project is going to realize. So it is another way of seeing it is an objective is something that we will see once the project is completed. And this is important because when we formulate objectives, we have to formulate and use words that describe a changed situation and not an activity. So it's not doing something. It's not, for instance, let's say, doing working on a health program or an education program. These are activities that can be strengthening the school system, strengthening the health system. These are activities, activities that can be done within the project, but the objectives are and have to be formulated as a change. So the education system is improved in a way that we will describe and that is coherent with our project, or the health system is more accessible. So these are objectives. Objectives are situations and not actions. This is a common problem in project formulation, that sometimes there is a bit of confusion with how to formulate objectives and how to formulate activities. Activities is realizing a training program for teachers, or realizing an advocacy program, or building a health center. These are activities. The objectives that these activities achieve are situations. So a health center is accessible to a number of people. The quality of the teaching in the schools of a certain province is improved for certain reasons. So this is something we really have to be quite careful, because it changes a lot the quality of a project. If problems and objectives are strictly related, and they have to be formulated in such a way that we can really appreciate and understand what changes the project is going to achieve. Because let's say in the donor's mind, or in the people who evaluate the project, it is interesting to understand the activities, but more than that, it is important to understand how the project that they are evaluating will change a certain situation. So the description of the objectives is very important. Okay, so once the objectives have been determined, we will be able to determine the sequence and describe all the activities. So the activities are the concrete actions that are needed to realize our objectives. So might be training courses, building schools, or building health centers, or all the actions that are needed to realize the change that we are about to work on. A direct consequence of the determination of the activities is the resource scheduling. So the budget Each activity will have costs that we can determine and will need resources that we can determine. So human resources, materials, costs of different nature. So as you can see, the whole process which leads to the activity and resource scheduling is a process that starts from the problem analysis. So the order is problems, objectives, activities, resources. So we don't start from the activities, because if we start from the activities, we don't have the guarantee that these activities may really lead to the objectives that we want to pursue. But starting from problems and objectives, we then can derive the activities and costs which are necessary for our project. We will see this more in detail also with what we call the problem and objective trees, which are a logic structure that shows us the result of this analysis and planning phase. But we will see this a bit later. Now, I understand that these are many new concepts. We will be able to come back on all these concepts in the next meeting. However, if you have some questions on this, it would be, I mean, we can try to see if there is any problem, any question. And then we would I would quickly introduce you to the monitoring phase that we will see in the last session. And then we will take some time that we still have to show you the exercise that I will ask you to prepare for the next time. So if there is any question on what we saw about analysis and planning. So before seeing the exercise for next time, I would like to give you a brief introduction on the last topic that we will see in the last session, which is monitoring and evaluation, and in particular, how to prepare a good monitoring and evaluation plan. As we said, monitoring and evaluation is an essential element in the project cycle because it helps us to give a feedback from our project and feed it into the programming cycle. However, within a project, monitoring is very important for different reasons. Of course, it's important to ensure that the planned results are achieved. So we will have the possibility to measure the results with indicators and see, which should be as objective as possible, so that the results that we measure can be measured and verified by different people in the same way. Of course, a good monitoring plan can help to mitigate and manage crisis, because a good monitoring will show us when problems arise, when we, for instance, have a problem with certain activities or with certain objectives. And it will also help us to focus on priorities, because if, for instance, we find that certain objectives or results are hard to achieve, then we can prioritize on those in order to be able to meet the results that we set out in the project. Of course, a good monitoring plan helps us to know what and when should be done, so we can track our progress and know what and when we should implement the different activities. But a good monitoring plan has also another function, which is more informative, because it gives broad information on how the project is working to the different stakeholders, so it can motivate the stakeholders. Often the stakeholders are in charge of, different stakeholders are in charge of parts of a project, of sections, of lines of action, and they don't have broad comprehension of the whole project. So a good monitoring plan can give an idea of how the project as a whole is progressing, and in what measure it is realizing the objectives. And this helps to generate a shared understanding of the project, of its successes, but also of its problems. And it ensures accountability, because we can measure what has been done and ensure that the different organizations, people, or institutions responsible of the different parts of the project are working as planned. So this is just a brief introduction on the importance of the monitoring and evaluation. And I wanted to show you briefly this so that you have a complete idea on the different topics that we are going to see in the next sessions. Now, to prepare the next session, which will be devoted especially to the analysis phase, I would ask you to do this exercise for the next time. So the idea is that for the next Thursday, you can prepare a problem and objective tree as shown in this slide. Then we will analyze it and see what it is all about. And so I would ask you to build a problem and objective tree for a project of your choice. So something that each organization that participates in this course may consider an interesting topic for its organization. So something you would like to work on, something you know, and something you would like to work on. So the idea is that you can start developing an analysis that will lead to the formulation of a logical framework, so the base for a project, starting with the analysis of the problems and of the objectives, using this methodology, that is the problem and objective trees. Now, I would like to show you and illustrate briefly this example. As you can see, it's a very simple example, very easy, but it can help to understand the logic of this tool. So the idea is that on this left side, on the problem tree side, we name all the problems of a certain context, which is the context where we want to work with our problem, with our project. So all these problems turn around a central problem. So what we identify as a central problem that we want to focus on with our project. Now, in this example, as I said, it's very simple, but it's useful just from the didactic and learning standpoint. We identify the central problem as frequent bus accidents. So if this is our central problem, in the lower part of this tree, we will have the problems of lower level that cause this central problem. As you can see, the logic here is causes, effects. So the problems of lower level are the ones that cause problems of higher level. So this kind of analysis can help us identify the different problems. Now, in this case, in this simple example, we identified, for instance, a lower level problem is lack of driving skills in bus drivers. This problem can lead to another problem, that the drivers are not careful enough because they lack skills. And of course, this problem contributes better to the bus accidents. However, there are other problems that equally contribute to this central problem. For instance, the vehicles are too old, or they are maintained insufficiently. These two elements, these two problems, lead to bad conditions of vehicles. And of course, the bad conditions contribute to frequent bus accidents. But there are other possible problems that contribute to this central problem. For instance, bad conditions of roads. In this case, this is another cause for frequent bus accidents. So as you can see, the problems are structured with a cause-effect logic and have to lead to a central problem. Now, this part of this tree, so from the central problem to the base of the tree, is let's say the area that our project will work with. So our project will face this central problem, and to solve this problem, it will have to solve the problems that underlie this central problem. When we go to the higher part of the tree, we see that these problems that are listed in this higher part are effects, are consequences of the central problem that we identified. So they are, of course, caused partly by the central problem that we identified, but they can also have other causes. So this part of the higher part of the tree gives us an idea of how tackling our project, our central problem, will have an effect, a higher effect, a broader effect on, let's say, the society or a larger community, more in general terms. So we have these two parts. The lower part is the part that we focus on with our project, and the higher part is the context within our project will have an effect. Now, once we have identified the problem tree, we can proceed to the analysis, the objective analysis. So we can proceed to the transformation of these problems into solutions, because basically the objective analysis is transforming negative situations to desired positive situations, which are the ones that we will try to achieve with our project. So in this case, for instance, we have drivers lack driving skills. The result that we want to obtain is that drivers are better trained. That if vehicles are too old, then we want to obtain that old vehicles are replaced. If maintenance is insufficient, then we want to have a good maintenance program in place. And of course, these results will lead to higher level results. So drivers will drive more carefully, vehicles will be in better conditions, road conditions are improved, and all this will lead to a lower frequency of bus accidents. If this objective is met, then the goals, the higher level goals will also, we will contribute to the higher level goals. As you can see in this transformation process from problems to objectives, we have different levels. At low level, we call these objectives, so these positive situations that we desire with our project, we call them results. And a project may have different results, more results, a certain number of results that all lead to the project purpose or specific objective. It can be called in different ways. However, normally I would recommend, and many donors recommend, that a project has one purpose, one specific objective. And it may have many results, but it's important that it can focus on one specific objective, to be very specific on that objective. So this is the purpose of the project. And the higher level positive situations that our project will contribute to obtain will be the general objectives or the goals of the project. So it will be what our project contributes, the impact that our project contributes to obtain. So as you can see, different levels of objectives directly derive from the different levels of the project, of the problems that we have analyzed in our problem tree. One more thing I wanted to add on this analysis is something about what we mentioned earlier, the strategy. A strategy of a project is the choice of what we want to include in our project. And here, for instance, we can have an example of strategy choice. As we can see, we have a line here concerning skills, driver skills. So if we work on driver skills, we will have a training program that will lead to improved skills of the drivers. And this is a line of action of the project. And we can decide to include this line in our project. So this will be a result of our project. Another line is the conditions of the vehicles. So what we want is to have vehicles in good conditions. So we will work on a replacement program and on a maintenance program. And we can decide to keep this part of the project within our activities, so within our strategy. So we can, for instance, say that our strategy will include a training program and a maintenance and replacement program of the vehicles. However, we see here there is another problem, that is road conditions, and possibly for instance, a small social organization or a small organization, we will not be in the conditions to be able to work on improving the road conditions. Normally, this can be done by public institutions who are in charge of road maintenance. So we can choose to exclude this part of the problem structure and consequently of the objective structure. We can exclude it from our strategy because we are not able to face this kind of action. However, we will have to keep in mind that this is part of the problem. So we can work on a part of the problem. However, it is important that somebody else takes care also of this part of the problem to be more effective in obtaining the changes that we want to obtain with our objective. And this means that, and we will see how to do it, in the logical framework, we will keep in mind that a part of the problems, and so a part of the solutions, will be outside of our scope, but we will have to monitor that the institutions who are in charge realize these activities and pursue these objectives in order to be effective in realizing our objective. So this is a small example that can help us to understand what an external element can be for a project. So something we have to monitor. So for instance, if the institutions who are in charge of taking care of the roads don't do it, then we will have to take some corrective actions. We will have to, for instance, do some advocacy, some sensitization, try to lead this institution to comply with its obligations. So this is a very, as I said, very, very simple exercise. What I would ask you to do for the next, before the next session is, as I said, to build a problem and objective tree, very simple one. Don't need to, it doesn't need to be too complex, but the idea is to see and start working with problems and their logic relations, and to transform the problems in objectives, and see how to order problems and objectives logically. And this is really the most important aspect and part of a good project formulation process, as it really gives the elements to build a good structure. In the Moodle system, there is a file with the exercises. You will see there are 3 exercises. This is the first, so we just ask you to complete this first exercise. The next ones will be for the next 2 sessions. And I would ask you to complete these exercises and upload them to the Moodle platform, possibly by Tuesday, so that Wednesday I can have a look at them and be ready for Thursday for our next meeting. This is important because it will help us with examples that you know, that you're familiar with, to understand this process. I understand that it's something, it may be something new, but the idea is not to build the perfect problem and objective tree. It's just to start, having a taste for what this kind of analysis means, so that we can be, you can maybe have more questions, doubts, that next time we can try and solve and discuss. So there is a template of this. This same template is in the Moodle, in the file, and it can be changed, it can be edited, so you can use this template. However, if you want to, you don't have to be constrained by the number of boxes. You can add them, you can eliminate part of these. The important thing is that you have one central problem and one purpose. This is the main thing. And the other problems and results can be more or less, it doesn't matter. So you can use this template if you wish, or if you prefer preparing a new file or doing it by hand, no problem. The idea is that you can work on this problem and objective tree with an example of your choice, with something of your choice. So, are there questions about this, about what we saw?
So the idea is to make the effort, to make the exercise, and to confront with the methodology. So we will have the opportunity to go deeper in the next sections. Okay. So the invitation is to use the Moodle platform, and you can see the material, you can see this presentation, so you can check and you can work. And the idea is to confront with a methodology and to have a good question for the next time.
Yes, and if there are more than one person from an organization, I think they can work together on the same problem and objective tree, so that you can discuss the problem and have one for each organization.
Okay, thank you.
So for today, what I wanted to see is, I mean, I think we can stop here. If you have any questions, any doubts, any ideas, you're welcome to ask.
So the email that you received information for the Moodle is the email we will use for make some questions, or if you have doubts, you can write and we will answer your question. So thank you, Nicolo, for this first session, and we will be the next week at the same time.
Okay.
So, okay.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you.
Okay.